Look at a piece of finely cut crystal, the way it catches the light, the weight of it in your hand, the perfect ringing chime it makes when struck. For over 400 years, the absolute pinnacle of this art form didn't come from Venice or Bohemia. It came from the soot-choked industrial heartland of England, the Black Country. Specifically, it came from a cluster of parishes just outside the market town of Stourbridge: Amblecote, Wordsley, Brierley Hill and Lye. For centuries, this small area was the undisputed global capital of glassmaking. It produced pieces that graced the tables of royalty, dazzled crowds at the Great Exhibition of 1851, and pushed the boundaries of human craftsmanship. Yet it was an industry born out of necessity, fueled by refugees, and built on the abundant raw material resources of the English Midlands. Today, the towering brick cones that once defined the skyline are mostly gone, and the massive factories have closed their doors. But the story of Stourbridge glass is not just a story of industrial decline. It's a story of survival, of changing tides, and of an enduring legacy of artistry that still burns brightly today. Welcome to the 400-year history of Stourbridge glass. The story begins in the early 17th century, but not with local craftsmen. It begins with refugees. In the late 1500s and early 1600s, skilled Huguenot glassmakers from the Lorraine region of northeastern France were fleeing religious persecution. They brought with them centuries-old secrets of glass production and arrived in England looking for a place to rebuild their lives and their trade. Initially, these immigrant glassmakers relied on wood to fire their furnaces, setting up in heavily forested areas. But in 1615, King James I passed a new law banning the use of wood for glass furnaces. The Royal Navy needed the timber to build ships. The glassmakers had to find a new fuel source, and fast. They looked to the earth and they found Stourbridge. The area was a geographical goldmine for the industry. Not only did it have vast, easily accessible seams of coal to fuel the incredibly hot furnaces, but it also possessed something even more valuable: Stourbridge fire clay. This unique, highly refractory clay was essential for building the furnaces and the pots or crucibles that held the molten glass. Without clay that could withstand the intense, prolonged heat of a coal fire without cracking or melting, the industry simply wouldn't exist. By 1612, the first glasshouse was likely established in Lye by the Coleman family. In these early days, the work was purely utilitarian. They weren't making sparkling crystal yet. They were churning out window glass and sturdy dark glass bottles. It was dirty, grueling work, but the foundation was laid. Stourbridge was about to change the world of glass. As the 17th century came to a close, two massive developments changed the trajectory of Stourbridge glass forever. The first was a change to the landscape itself. To generate the massive temperatures needed to melt the silica and ash, glassmakers developed a radical new architectural structure: the glass cone. These massive brick structures, some towering nearly 100 foot into the air, acted as giant chimneys. They enclosed the furnace and the workers, sucking air fiercely through the fire to push the temperatures higher than ever before. Soon, the skyline of the Black Country bristled with these immense smoking cones. The second major development happened down in London in 1674, when a man named George Ravenscroft patented a new recipe for glass. By adding lead oxide to the mix, he created lead crystal. This new glass was softer, heavier, and had a brilliant sparkling clarity that was far superior to traditional glass. Because it was softer, it was also much easier to cut and engrave. The Stourbridge glassmakers quickly adopted this new lead crystal formula. They shifted their focus away from simple bottles and window panes and aimed their sights squarely on the luxury market. Throughout the 18th century, Stourbridge transitioned into producing elegant drinking glasses, decanters, and fine tableware. A complex network of canals, including the Stourbridge Canal built in 1779, was woven through the region. It brought the coal in and took the fragile, beautiful glass out to the rest of the world. The stage was set for an era of unprecedented dominance. The 19th century was the golden age. During the Victorian era, Stourbridge wasn't just participating in the glass industry, it was dictating it. Factories with names that would become legendary: Thomas Webb and Sons in Amblecote, Richardson's in Wordsley, Stevens and Williams in Brierley Hill, and later Stourbridge Crystal, grew into massive industrial powerhouses. The Crystal Mile, a stretch of road along the canal, became the most concentrated area of glass production in the world. When the Great Exhibition was held at the Crystal Palace in London in 1851, Stourbridge glassmakers were the stars of the show, proving they could rival and even surpass the historic glass houses of Venice and Bohemia. The Victorians loved ornate, highly decorated items, and the Stourbridge craftsmen delivered. They developed brilliantly coloured glass, intricate acid etching, and copper wheel engraving, but the absolute zenith of their artistry was the revival of cameo glass. Cameo glass involves fusing of two or more layers of different coloured glass, usually a white layer over a dark blue or ruby background, and then painstakingly carving away the top layer to create a raised 3D design. In 1876, a local genius named John Northwood achieved the impossible. He spent 3 years hand carving a flawless glass replica of the ancient Roman Portland vase. This monumental achievement proved that Stourbridge housed the greatest glass artists on earth. Following Northwood, craftsmen like George and Thomas Woodall elevated cameo glass to a fine art form, producing pieces that are today considered priceless museum artifacts. For decades, the furnaces roared, the cutting wheels spun, and Stourbridge glass was shipped to the dining rooms of the global elite. Golden ages rarely last forever. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 brought a sudden end to the production of highly decorated luxury art glass. The factories pivoted to produce utilitarian items for the new war effort, like bulbs and technical glass, and when peace returned, the world had changed. The opulent, heavy decorated cameo and coloured glass of the Victorian era had fallen out of fashion. To survive, the major Stourbridge factories doubled down on clear, heavy, cut lead crystal. For a time it worked. The mid-20th century saw companies like Stourbridge Crystal and Royal Brierley exporting vast quantities of cut crystal across the globe. However, as the century drew to a close, the perfect storm began to gather. Production costs in the UK skyrocketed. Foreign competitors, utilising cheaper labour and automated, modernised manufacturing processes, began flooding the market with less expensive alternatives. Furthermore, consumer taste was shifting again. Heavy cut crystal was increasingly seen as old-fashioned, something belonging in a grandparent's display cabinet rather than in a modern home. The industry, perhaps blinded by its own historic success, was slow to modernise. The great names began to fall. Thomas Webb and Sons closed in 1990. Webb Corbett was swallowed by Royal Doulton and eventually shut down. In 2001, Stourbridge Crystal, the pride of the Crystal Mile, was closed by its parent company Waterford Wedgwood, resulting in massive job losses. The giant brick cones that had defined the skyline were largely demolished, deemed obsolete and too expensive to maintain. By the early 2000s, the era of large-scale factory glass production in the Black Country was effectively over. It would be easy to end the story there, as a tragic tale of industrial decay, but glass is a material born of fire and transformation. and the spirit of Stourbridge glassmakers proved just as resilient. While the massive factories closed, a new movement was taking root, the studio glass movement. Instead of an industrial assembly line, glassmaking returned to the hands of individual artists and small teams working in independent studios. Today, Stourbridge is the vibrant epicentre of this movement in the UK. The legacy lives on, not in massive volume, but in breathtaking innovation and artistry. The Red House glass cone in Worsley stands preserved, one of only 4 complete cones left in Britain, operating as a working museum and a home for craft businesses. The Ruskin Glass Centre, built on the site of the old Webb Corbett factory, is now a thriving hub of independent glass artists, engravers and designers. And in 2023, the brand new Stourbridge Glass Museum opened its doors, permanently housing one of the finest collections of historic glass in the world, while simultaneously promoting the future of the craft. They even recently conserved and unveiled pieces of the legendary Churchill Memorial Screen, a testament to the area's post-war resilience. Companies like Stourbridge Crystal still produce high-quality glass-led crystal, and master craftsmen like Alistair Malcolm continue to push the boundaries of contemporary art glass right here in the Black Country. Stourbridge glass may no longer be the industrial juggernaut it was in the 1800s. The roaring furnaces of the massive factories have cooled, but the fire of creativity hasn't gone out, it's just changed hands. From fleeing refugees to Victorian masters to the independent studio artists of today, the glass made in these parishes remains woven into the cultural fabric of the Black Country. And as long as there are artists willing to brave the heat, the crystal heart of England will keep on beating. Thank you for watching.